Hi BookTube, I'm back again, and this time I want to talk about feminist writers to read during Women's History Month. I'm pretty much as much of a flaming feminist as you can get, although sometimes I think I'm a bad feminist. I cannot wait to read that collection of essays by Roxane Gay. Now this is totally a personal selection. This is not feminist writers' greatest hits. I'm leaving off a lot of people here. These are the books that have really touched me and been influential to me in my thinking about feminism. So don't yell at me if I leave off your favorite here. These are the ones that I am recommending from my own love of them. Let's go in chronological order, shall we? The first in my pile here is the classic Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own. Every feminist, every writer, every woman that loves books needs to read this book. This is Virginia Woolf laying out her basic feminist manifesto, which is that women, as we all know, are repressed, and that one of the solutions to the repression of women is for women to have their own income, which was much more radical than it is today, and, as the title says, to have a room of one's own, a space in which to be oneself, a space in which one can be entirely undisturbed and creative. And that is still an applicable notion for today, when women are overwhelmed by by responsibilities of home and children and are often expected to take on all of those duties themselves, even when they do have a male partner. This is a fantastic book. It is written gorgeously, as only Virginia Woolf can write. You all know I'm kind of obsessed with Virginia Woolf, so I know that I am biased, but this is a book I have loved dearly over the years, and it is a classic seminal book. I know there have been other perhaps equally seminal books, but this is the one that speaks to my heart, and so this is the one that I'm talking to you about today. I'm going to skip a bit chronologically, and I'm going to move us from 1929, when this was published, to 1963, The Feminine Mystique. This is Betty Friedan. This is another classic feminist text. In later years, it's been heavily criticized for being very centered on white middle-class women. However, I don't think that actually takes away from the fact that it was incredibly influential then and started and more or less kicked off second wave feminism. I have read this book more than once. You can see my copy is rather battered. In it, Betty Friedan takes on the problem that has no name, as she calls it, which is the sense of hopelessness that women had when they were told over and over, and still are often told, that if our only place isn't in the home with the children, that's the place that should be most important to us. And I just love the way she rips that apart. Children are not a woman's first and only care in life. The home is not the thing that a woman should care about most. There's a huge world out there that women should, and indeed for the sake of the happiness of our souls, must engage in. And I just come back to this book over the years. I really love it a lot. Third book and the third author that I want to talk about is Adrienne Rich. I am very fond of Adrienne Rich. I've read a reasonable amount of her. The place that I would recommend that everybody else start is on Lies, Secrets, and Silence. This is a collection of her essays from 1966 to 1978. She writes about women's work. She writes about language and feminism. She writes about feminism in general. She writes about motherhood. She actually wrote a whole book about motherhood called Of Woman Born. She is a beautiful, beautiful writer. She was also a poet, and I have some of her poetry on my shelf as well. This was a really influential text for me as well. I read it in college. But this is just a delightful book. And you can take bits of it, you can read it cover to cover, or you can dip in and out of it as you will, because it is a collection of essays and does not need to be read sequentially necessarily. Next on my list, Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. I also really love Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde was also a poet, just like Adrienne Rich was a poet. And this was collected from the 1980s. Audre Lorde is one of the foundational voices of Black women's feminism, which pushed back against the whiteness and the leaving out of Black voices that Betty Friedan has been rightfully criticized as doing. I really love Audre Lorde's voice. I actually find her much more accessible than, as much as I adore Virginia Woolf and Adrienne Rich, I find her much more welcoming and accessible than those. I find myself drawn into her version of feminism, but sometimes with Woolf and Rich in particular, I feel like I don't measure up. Like I'm not smart enough, I'm not intellectual enough, I'm not a feminist enough, I'm not radical enough. Even though Audre Lorde is very radical, I always feel drawn in by her. I never feel excluded. And so if you're feeling perhaps a little intimidated by feminism, I might recommend Audre Lorde for that. And perhaps I'm biased in this. It's been years since I read Sister Outsider, but I very recently read the Cancer Journals by Audre Lorde, which are less about feminism explicitly and more about her personal experience with cancer. And that's where I'm getting, for the most part, that's where all these like incredibly warm, fuzzy memories of Audre Lorde are coming from. It's possible that this is more of an intimidating book than I'm remembering, but that's not how I find Audre Lorde as an author. She's someone that I really wish I could have a cup of tea with. She's just delightful and so creative and so boundary pushing. The last book I have for you is not one that I've read. I've read others by this author, but I don't have them on my shelf. Wounds of Passion by Bell Hooks. Now, the classic Bell Hooks feminist text is Ain't I a Woman, Black Woman in Feminism, which she wrote when she was only 19. But she has a huge corpus of work, and she's the only one of these writers who is still alive today, which is pretty exciting. Bell Hooks is a very foundational feminist writer to like the third wave feminism. So this is her memoir, and I picked this up because while I enjoy Bell Hooks, I was not at that moment in the mood for explicitly, I mean, everything she writes is feminist. I was not at the moment that I picked this up in the mood for like essays. So this is her memoir, and it's about writing. I love reading authors writing about writing. But Bell Hooks in general is someone that I really recommend to everybody. Now, I know there are a lot of authors that I've left off of this list. I did not mention Gloria Steinem, who obviously is influential. I didn't mention Judith Butler, who's somebody that speaks to me as well. I didn't mention Maya Angelou. I just didn't mention a lot of feminist writers who one should read. But these were the books that I have on my shelf that have spoken to me over the years and that I keep coming back to, or authors that I keep coming back to. And so these are the ones that I wanted to share with you. So that was a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing you soon. Happy reading and bye for now.